Lena first noticed the shift in Caleb during a summer sunset. The sky over their small coastal town was awash with shades of pink and gold, the kind of beauty that usually brought him to the porch to sit with her in quiet admiration. But that evening, Caleb didn't come outside. Instead, he sat inside the house, staring out the window with a strange expression, a mix of guilt and fear. She asked if something was wrong, and he gave her a distracted smile. "Just tired," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. The words didn't convince her, but she let it slide. Caleb had always been a quiet man, prone to retreating into himself when he was stressed. Yet this time it felt different. This time it felt like he was retreating from her. Over the next few weeks, Lena began to notice more peculiarities. Caleb avoided eye contact, his responses becoming more clipped. At night, he tossed and turned, muttering words Lena couldn't make out. And then one night, she woke to hear him sitting up in bed, speaking clearly in a tone that sent a shiver down her spine. "She's waiting, in the dark, where we ended." The words played over and over in Lena's mind the next day. Who was she? What did he mean by where we ended? When she tried to bring it up at breakfast, Caleb laughed it off. "Probably just a weird dream," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Lena couldn't ignore the growing strangeness in their home. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, the once comforting creaks of the old wooden floors now feeling ominous. Caleb had taken to spending long hours in the attic, claiming he was sorting through old things. One afternoon, while Caleb was at the store, Lena decided to see what he had been doing. The attic was dimly lit, the only light coming from a single, dust-covered bulb that hung from the ceiling. Boxes were stacked neatly along the walls, just as they had been since they moved in. Nothing appeared disturbed. But as Lena turned to leave, something caught her eye. A small black journal lying on the floor. She picked it up, her fingers brushing against its worn leather cover. Opening it, she saw page after page filled with Caleb's handwriting. Most of it was nonsensical. Fragments of thoughts, sketches of strange symbols, and, repeatedly, the phrase, "Do you remember me?" Lena's heart raced as she flipped through the journal. On the final page, Caleb had drawn a crude map. It showed the coastal highway that ran near their town, with a small X marked beside a winding road. Beneath it, he had written, "Where it all began." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the journal hidden under her pillow. Caleb lay beside her, his breathing deep and steady. At 3 a.m., the whisper came. "Do you remember me?" It was faint, almost indistinguishable from the sound of the wind outside. But it wasn't the wind. Lena bolted upright, her eyes darting around the dark room. Caleb was still asleep, his face calm. But the whisper came again, this time louder. "Do you remember me?" Lena's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the corner of the room. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow move, a figure, impossibly tall and thin, retreating into the darkness. She shook Caleb awake, her voice trembling. "Caleb, wake up! Someone's in the house!" Caleb's eyes opened slowly, but there was no alarm in them, no urgency. Instead, he looked at her with a strange resignation. "It's her," he whispered. The next morning, Caleb was gone. His side of the bed was cold, his phone left behind on the nightstand. Lena called his name, her voice echoing through the empty house, but there was no response. Frantic, she checked his phone. There were no recent calls, no texts, except one. "Do you remember me?" The message had no sender. Lena's fingers trembled as she scrolled through his phone. Then she found something she hadn't noticed before. A folder hidden within the phone's files. Inside were pictures of a woman. She was pale, her dark hair plastered to her face as though she had been caught in the rain. Her eyes stared directly at the camera, burning with anger. Lena dropped the phone, her mind racing. Who was this woman, and why did Caleb have these photos? Determined to find answers, Lena decided to follow the map in Caleb's journal. She drove out to the coastal highway, the stormy weather matching her turbulent emotions. The winding road marked on the map led to an abandoned cabin. It was old and decrepit, its windows shattered, the front door hanging loosely on its hinges. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Lena's footsteps echoed as she ventured deeper into the cabin. In the center of the room was a single object, a mirror. Its surface was cracked, but as Lena approached, she saw her reflection, and behind her, the woman from the photos. Lena spun around, but no one was there. When she turned back to the mirror, the woman was closer, her mouth moving silently. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her voice shaking. The woman's reflection tilted its head, a cruel smile spreading across her face. "You don't remember?" And then Lena saw it, the night she and Caleb had driven down this road. The storm, the figure in the rain, the moment they had sped past her, leaving her behind. "You left me," the woman hissed. The memory hit Lena like a tidal wave. She remembered Caleb's panic, his insistence that they couldn't stop. And now she realized the woman hadn't forgotten. The whispers followed Lena back to the house. Caleb's absence became a void she couldn't fill, but she knew she couldn't run anymore. The woman wanted her to remember, and now she did. One night, as the whispers grew louder, Lena typed a reply to the message on Caleb's phone. "I remember." The house grew deathly cold. Shadows writhed along the walls, and the woman's voice filled the room. "Now it's your turn." The figure emerged from the darkness, her rage palpable. Lena didn't fight. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate. But instead of pain, there was silence. When Lena opened her eyes, she was no longer in the house. She stood on the winding road, rain pouring down around her. The woman stood before her, waiting. "It's time to make things right," the woman said, her voice echoing with 100 others. Lena nodded, understanding that she couldn't escape the past. Together they vanished into the storm. Returned, the end.